this episode of Behind the Bow, I'm blessed to have Alan Boice here from Liberty Bows. I'm really happy to have you on here because I think you have some really unique characteristics in your bow and the design and the elements and the wood that you put into them. So I appreciate you coming on, Alan.
Well, thank you, Cody. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to sharing whatever I might share with the people out there and see if they find it interesting or not.
We're going to squeeze all the secrets out of you, hopefully, and find out how the magic is made. But we were talking beforehand. We've never really spoke. We've exchanged a lot of text. Usually once a week, you'll say, "When are you going to send me my bow back?" And I'll say, "Not much longer now." And I'll ask you a few questions. But you've been building bows for around 40 plus years. 43 years is what you've said, right?
I have.
And your first were ASLs, and you kind of evolved from there. And you have a full lineup of longbows. You mainly deal with you, is that correct?
Well, I love you, and I have a
Okay.
lot of that's it's a good wood if you can get the good stuff.
All right.
I got my own yew wood back in the 70s. I have a stack of yew out here, a lifetime supply of yew, but I also use bamboo. There's not a thing wrong with bamboo. I love bamboo. Used elm over the years, used Eastern hard rock maple, like a lot of other people have used, but yew is kind of a special material for a bow limb, especially in my English bow and those longer bows. It's really a smooth wood to draw. It's fun to shoot, and it's fun to work with. It's kind of a soft hardwood, member of the cedar family, but
Yeah,
it
and
makes
it's just stunning. I'm showing kind of an up close of your Osage U combination, and this is the shorter English that you built me with your dish grip, and then here is the original English that you sent me. It's just stunning to me the combination of Osage and U, and not just the way it looks, but also how well it performs, as you said. So hopefully we'll get you to give us all your secrets on materials as well. But I know people will be really interested in the story behind the bow in terms of the man and the design. So start us from the beginning, how you got started, and take us to current state design, if you don't mind.
some friends of mine that I graduated from high school. They got the traditional bug, and they said, "Well, let's build some bows." So we called a guy here in Oregon. You may have heard of him, John Strunk from the Spirit Longbow Company. He builds just silk bows. He was building glass bows
Oh
back
yeah.
then, but because he had a reaction to the glue, he finally had to give it up. So I called John. I go up to Tillamook, Oregon, buy a couple bows from him. I'm talking to him about building bows, and I'd like to try that. So he said, "Here's what you need." He gave me the all the specifications, what kind of glue to get, where to get it, buy laminations this thick from back then. We bought them from old master crafters, most of that stuff, or Bingham Archery, and we made a pretty crude form, straight form, maybe a little reflex in it, cut out some wood for handles and threw it together, and that's how I got started building longbows.
Your first bows were basically ASLs, is what you were telling me. They were straight limb bows,
Yes.
and then you've kind of evolved from there. Can you walk us through the evolution of your builds and your designs, and kind of there's always a purpose behind every design, and I think it really helps people choose the right bow when they understand the purpose of each design.
Went to Creston, Washington in 1984. That's where I was introduced to my first reflex deflex longbow. And a friend of mine, Dick Robertson, who you obviously have heard of probably,
Hmm.
he had a bow, and we were shooting at a long range elk target, and I was shooting a 72-pound, I think, straight U bow, and he was shooting a 64-inch 72-pound bow also. It had locust limbs in it, black locust limbs, and it was reflex deflex. And he says, "Look at this, Alan, you ought to try this." So I shot some arrows out of my bow, and they would fall about 20 yards short. And he says, "Try it."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I shot some out of his, and I'm shooting 15, 20 yards over the target. And I said, "Wow, this is pretty neat. This is really a good performing bow." And it was just a mild reflex deflex bow, just enough difference to make it shoot that much better. Didn't have the hand shock that my bow did, and it just had much better cast. So I went home and started building forms. And of course, every form is perfect. You get this new form, you've got this new reflex deflex design. This is the this is the best thing since chocolate ice cream.
Right.
Well, uh, not so. And pretty soon you'll start thinking about, well, maybe I could add a little bit more here and a little bit more there and change this and change that. And I'm where I'm at now after many, many different experiments. In fact, I had a bow form burning party one time and just got rid of about 10 or 15 forms.
Oh
And
my gosh.
a friend of mine said, well, why didn't you give them to some people so they can build some bows off those? I said, well, they can go through the process like I did. They can figure it out.
Yeah, it's very iterative, I'm sure. So for the folks that are watching, whenever Alan's talking about his reflex deflex, you can see this is a Liberty English in this hand, and in this hand I have his Contender, and you can see his Contender has a bit more curve to it than the English. That's what you're referring to, is that right, Alan?
What I'm referring to, and that Contender, I kind of arrived at that as a really good performing bow, and I've stuck with that for a mild reflex deflex bow over the years. I'd probably changed that form 5 or 6 times to get it to where it's at, and it's good enough. I mean, I told a friend one time you can only do so much to a longbow to make it better. So you just get it where you like it, get it where it shoots good, and go with it. Now from that, I kind of branched off into a lot of like a lot of bowyers do these more hybrid longbows,
Hmm.
which Chief is, and then my Edge has a lot of reflex deflex in it. Um, are they better? You know, it's personal preference. It comes down to personal want, desire, I think, and what people are comfortable with. I will say that a lot of reflex deflex in a bow, like my Edge, it is. You haven't shot one of those yet, but it's very smooth drawing, and
Yeah.
it is a bow. They shoot a little differently. If you're transitioning from a recurve to a long bow, maybe a hybrid bow is kind of more the direction you should start with. But I built all these hybrid bows, but in 1995, or I kind of was leading that direction. 1995, I decided I'm going to build me a hill style bow, straight in bow, which it ended up being the English. I built that one form. I wanted something that would hand shock was minimal. It would be comfortable to shoot and fun to shoot because I just wanted to get back to those hill style bows, and that's what you're holding in your hand right now. I modified that bow once since 1995, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago when I was talking to a friend of mine that you know, James Orrs, and we were looking at that and
Yeah.
thinking, hey, I think maybe I could put a little more reflex in that bow. And I did. And it really made the bow. I mean, not that the older Englishes weren't good or the design wasn't okay. It, it just really enhanced the performance. It, it softened up the bow a little bit. I don't know if it increased the speed any, but it just feels good in the hand. It shoots really, really well.
No, I completely agree. Now, is this the original handle? Is this design original, or did you mod
The
this?
No, the original handle was almost a straight grip with just a slight bit of locator in it,
Okay.
and that's the kind of grip that I put in the handle for our friend Ben down there in Australia. He
Yeah.
likes. Just send him another one last Friday. So
I know he's rubbing it in whenever he gets his new bows, and he is a connoisseur, so it always makes me feel good when he already knew about the English. I didn't surprise him with it, but when my lab work matches what subject matter experts feel when they shoot it, it always gives me a lot of confidence because this is almost it's not quite a reverse handle, but it's also not a straight. It's a very unique grip. It's narrow and it's hill style ish, but it's not quite a straight grip. Correct?
right, it's not quite a hill style. It's straight-ish, but I call it a mid handle. If you look at it from the side profile, you'll see where the overlays come fade outs or what's overlays, excuse me, the fade outs run into the limbs. It's
Right.
kind of middle of the bow. It's a hill style bow is generally starts with just reflex right out of the flatness of the handle or the flat
Hmm.
handle, and mine has a little bit of a dip in the front of it and kind of put a mid handle look to it. And then also on the English, I offer three options now. I just recently introduced a hill style traditional grip, but it's a 14-inch grip. These grips, or riser, excuse me, these risers on the original English that I haven't changed over the years are 18 inches in a 68-inch bow, 16 inches in a 66-inch and 64-inch bow, and in the hill style grip, 14 inches.
Yeah. So you have the hilt, before we get into the risers, because I have caught on that into your design. You have, I want to make sure people understand, you have this disc grip. This is what your, is this your locator grip or your disc grip? What do you refer to this as?
I call it a locator grip.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is your locator grip. It has a nice flat spot on the back and it has a little dish here or a locator here. I really like this grip. It's very, very, very repeatable. You have your mid grip, which is the one we were just speaking to that I was handling, which is very round and it has a bit of a flat, but it's kind of rounded on the back and it's narrow. And then you have now, I guess you're offering a straight up hill style straight grip, which
Yes.
I guess is what Ben has, right?
Well, actually, and here's that.
Okay, yeah, I want people to see the differences between these.
Now, these ones I put that in my cardigan, and added weight seems to really complement the bow and kind of tone it down.
So one thing, and you've already touched on it, one thing that's unique, and I mean, the whole point of Trad Lab is to save people money. We can't go to Cabela's and try a Liberty English or, any number of longbows. So I want people to be able to look at a picture and go, man, that looks like it may be forgiving. I don't know anything about the physics of archery. I only know what bowyers tell me, but I have spotted in a few designs, you hide what's actually, I mean, you brought it up before I did, but you hide this target riser inside of this traditional longbow. This is a really long riser. And if you look at a lot of longbow designs, the riser is actually really, really short, and the fade outs are really, really short. There's you and a few other designs that really sneak in this long riser with these long fade outs. And it just so happens the designs that I've tested that have this tend to be really smooth and tend to be um, good shooters. I don't know if that's because of that characteristic, but I did notice that. And I even, a buddy of mine, Paul McCarg, I threw a tape across here. I'm like, look how long this riser is that he hides in this bow, because it's almost like a target longbow disguised as a hill style with a really soft, mild R&D. It's really in its own category. This English, and it works, whatever it is. But yeah, I did pick up on the fact that you have that long riser, and even with Osage, there's nice weight right here in the middle. Maybe because of that.
There is, and that long riser, I think, is kind of the signature of the English bow or my English model. It just it touched on all the points and why it shoots as nice as it does. At least I believe it does, and I built that bow like that for years. I decided if I put a longer riser in that bow and long fade outs and soften it up a little bit, I think it'll take the hand shock out of the bow. And you
Yeah.
probably shot that really, I mean, they're quality bows, but they don't just thump. And I don't mind a
No.
thump.
No, they
That,
make your
that thump,
teeth. They'll make your teeth click. Yeah.
yes, they will. And that like, goes back to that old Martin ML10. I love shooting that bow, but boy, it, it, it jars you. It jars you when it does, and it's just over time, it's just not fun to shoot. You want to
And
be able to hit.
it's really hard. What I tell people, you have to spend a lot of money to find a longbow that shoots. And I see more variation in longbows than I do recurves when I test them. We spoke about this prior to hitting record, but a common test I do is I run a laser from limb tip to limb tip. I make sure the bow is on plane, and I test tiller out of each limb. You are unique, and I tell everybody this that asks me about Liberty. You are unique in that these bows are made by hand. This isn't a CNC bow. There's not big hydraulic presses. This is a guy making a bow by hand. And I actually have another English over there that you haven't sent me that I got from somewhere else so I could look for within variation to try to catch you, like see if there was a big difference in feet per second or tiller. Um, Alan, you make a very consistent bow from bow to bow, model to model, and they're always perfectly in line and on plane and very tiller resistant, meaning I can change my finger pressure or my knock height, and the bow accepts that without getting wonky or without losing a lot of cast. So you do. I'm really proud of your bows for that reason, and to have a handmade bow from somebody that's cut their own wood and aged it. What'd you say back in the '80s?
Right. In the 80s, I cut all my yew wood and a lot of my myrtle wood too.
So you cut this by yourself and you've aged it and you've maintained the wood over the years.
I have. Yeah.
So I mean, and I'm trad lab, so everyone thinks I'm all about metal bows and but I that really I really like that, the fact that you've cut your own wood, you've aged your own wood, you've found what works, and you build these by hand. This is really special, and it's now if it was 3/4 of an inch out from one way to the other, and it was out of plane, and I was 6 pounds variation from the top to the bottom limb, it's not very special. But the fact that you build it as precise as you do within model and between models is just really something that I'm proud of, and you should certainly be. I found it interesting, and you can tell me why, because again, I don't understand the physics. I tested all of these bows. The Contender, as we said, has more. You haven't gotten into that design yet, but it's got a little bit more R&D to it. And at 10 grains per pound, you're looking at around 177 feet per second, which is nothing to sneeze at, really. The English, which is not quite an ASL bow, I saw you post on the Howard Hill Facebook group, and you were gunned down that it wasn't a hill style bow, and it doesn't have a straight limb. It does have this slight curve to it, but it's a very slight curve, and it's not tillered like a hill style bow. I always kind of lump this and the Toki Super D similar together, and that they're kind of hybrids of each. This is tillered like a normal longbow, whereas the Super D you still need to hill it a little bit. But this bow runs around 172 feet per second, so you're picking up 5 feet per second roughly on a reasonably light arrow with the more R&D that you get out of this. And I'm sure your Contender's even faster because it's more. But it's interesting because we stumbled into this. I don't remember how we landed on, because I hate short bows, but this thing is a gem. I don't know. Remember how was it Orr that found this?
Um, well, James likes 66 inches, in this style bow. He still doesn't have one yet, but
Oh, that's
I,
good. I want
I,
to make sure I point that out, that I have a bow that he doesn't have.
I
He
see.
sent me pictures of him shooting my bow. But what's really interesting about your design, this is a 64-inch English, and both find their stacking point right at 30 inches. So are you modifying the tapers to account for that, or is this just how God made it?
Nope, I'm not. There's the same tapers in both bows. The riser's slightly shorter, but and for years, I would have people call me and say, "Hey, can you build that in a 64 inch or even 66 inch back in the day?" Nope,
Yeah, I
nope,
would have
not
never guessed that it would have worked out.
not well. Uh, I think since I actually changed the tapers in that bow, they're not as fast as some in the limbs. They're not the laminations. They're not as fast as a lot of guys use. But I used to use 1.5 per inch taper. Now it's a little bit faster, and I put 4 lambs in those bows, and in the shorter bows they just seem to work really well.
Yeah,
I
I can't. Yeah, it's really unique because I do not recommend going short on an ASL. But this thing just accepts it, and this stacks. I have the numbers here, and I'll do an individual bow review of all three of these with individual videos with
okay.
graphs so people can see them. But literally, 29 inches is the first time you see 3 pounds out of a 64-inch mild R&D longbow, which is really good. The Contender can go to 31 pounds before it sees 3 pounds, going off memory. And then, of course, the longer English is right here. There, I thought we would really be losing a lot. This draw force is smoother a little bit, but it's not what I was expecting a stack machine here, and we didn't get it. It was actually really, really pleasant. I will say, what string material comes with your strings?
uh, Fast flight for as long as I can get it.
The string
Okay.
I, yeah, the string I'm testing. I'm using this bow to test OCD strings. So I did speed testing with OCD endless loop on this, which may give it an advantage over Flemish. And I have a joke. I hope you take this well, and it's common. The greatest bowyers send you the worst strings. And I had, bless your heart, I cut zip ties off the Contender string silencers. And I said, I can't believe someone that makes such a beautiful and great performing bow zip ties their cat whiskers in. But bless your heart, I cut them out to do the speed test. I want everyone to know that. Picked up
No.
about 300 feet per second. But I
Well,
appreciate it.
there's a reason I do that now. I never used to do that, but this the cat whiskers we get now, it's not that old round good stuff we used to get,
It's the
and
flat stuff.
they
Yeah.
fall out of the string.
Yeah.
So I
I
thought
got you.
I'll fix that. And
Yeah,
a lot,
it's my favorite bowyers all send the wonkiest strings. So God bless you. You're sticking to the tradition with zip ties in the silencers. But I did test your bows with the zip ties taken out to give you that extra kick. But I was really surprised how well, for those guys that don't like 68 inches, which I don't mind 68 inches out of a bow this designed. I feel like that's kind of the way they're supposed to be. But this 64 breaks all the rules, and you get a really mild R&D longbow that does stack a bit more. I dropped brace height, I think, a little bit to find optimal on the shorter one.
okay,
Um, but it really breaks all the rules. It's not the shooter. I can outshoot the short one with the long one, and significantly so. But in terms of just a handy little hunting bow, it's great. And if you don't want to go all the way ASL, and you're wanting to look for something that's very traditional, that's got heart and soul in it, and it's this mild R&D. I think mild R&D kind of gets abused. We have hardcore ASL people, and we have R&D people, and no one really pays attention to this mild category. But they're soft bows, they're quiet bows, and they're very, very predictable and reliable in terms of design. And you're not going to have any stack problems out of any one of these. It's really, really surprising. By shaving, can you predict the speed difference by shaving 4 inches off?
I can't. No.
So I see this a lot. Recurves, not so much, but longbows always gain. So the this bow, which is 68 inches, and this bow, you're saying has the exact same tapers. So we're just dealing with mass that we're removing.
Correct.
This is a 172 and this is a 177. So the 4 inches gained you 5 feet per second, which quite
Okay.
frankly, it looks good on paper, and I could make bar graphs that make that look really, really extreme. If we were out in the field, it's not the reason to go short. You would want to go short if you just wanted to have a more compact bow. I love the fact that this bow, the longer bow, gives you better string angle and it's much more robust to weird release issues that I have. But really, really cool design, and turns out it's a flexible design. Who knew? So thanks to Orr for pushing you to change this and getting them shorter.
Yeah, that locator handle is really a nice option too for
Oh, I
guys
know.
that you have a hard time placing their hand or getting the right hand placement. And you can actually just the way I position the middle of the bow, where it's about an inch and a half above the shelf's about an inch and a half above center. A lot of guys just go 2 inches, and some guys will go just string the bow up and tiller whichever end is the tiller's on. It doesn't make any difference. That's just how they build those. But I actually center the bow a little bit differently, and you can put that pressure between your forefinger and thumb and just kind of shoot it almost like you do a recurve or
Yeah,
it's positive.
yeah, you really can. It's if you were transitioning from a standard recurve or a metal bow and you wanted to get real tratty, this pivot point is the true pivot point, is what I found. I don't gain any cast by rolling down. I can grab it and shoot it. And this bow, when I looked at it, because I didn't buy this bow, you sent me this first to test, and then I bought it because I didn't want to go to hell for stealing after I shot it. But this bow, when I first looked at it, I'll be honest with you, I'm like, oh, that's not going to shoot. Just because that grip doesn't, I'm accustomed to this, right? So I thought I would really have a hard time. But when I say this is robust to tiller, I, it really is robust to tiller and how you grab it. So I don't even think about this bow. I just place my hand on here and it seems to shoot really well. So for people that are afraid to try this, don't judge this grip based on, I don't know what I'm pointing at. My ASLs are over here, but don't judge this grip based on other ASLs. This is a very forgiving grip. but I do very much prefer this locator grip. It's just more, I'm more accustomed to that feel, and it helps you hit the same spot every time for sure. Do you notice a difference? I got to ask this because you brought it up. Um, do you notice a difference in draw force with you versus other woods?
I I think yew is really a smooth drawing wood for some reason, and this yew wood was cut in the 70s and 80s, so it's air dried, it's well seasoned, and I really think it's really a nice makes a nice drawing bow, especially in this style of bow. It's maybe yew is not as tough or durable as bamboo. If you drop it in the rocks, it's probably going to dent a little bit more, and you'd be doing that anyway. But it happens. You're hunting. But over, I've got yew bows out there for years and years, and never had any problems with them. But whatever a guy likes, that's a personal preference to them. But I just happen to have a good supply of yew wood. I kind of remember back when I was reading. I can't remember. It might have been one of John Schultz's bow, and he Howard Hill was always a bamboo guy, and you had to have this special bamboo, and that's good bamboo is important too. If you're going to get bamboo, you get the good stuff. But Schultz built him a yew bow. Howard didn't think yew would work, and then he kind of fell in love with that yew wood after Schultz built a bow for him, and thought, this is pretty good stuff. But yew has been around in the Pacific. Yew has been around and been used since back in the days of Saxon Pope and,
Right,
uh, Bill Sweetland and all these old the Wilhelm boys, all these old time traditional archers, that's all they had was a stick and a string and wood arrows.
right.
And they went out, they cut it, and they made whatever they had or whatever they could get. And I've had guys tell me over the years, oh, you would, it's not. Well, a lot of times warriors can't get the good stuff or they can't even get you wood. Uh, so yeah, use whatever you have. If you have, I've built red elm bows for years because that was the good stuff. And then like Eastern Hard Rock maple, that was the only.
Well, it's
We have a lot of good resources here in Oregon when it comes to good boat
yeah.
materials.
So can
What
you've walked us through kind of your ASL that you started with, the English. You touched a bit on the contender, but can I get you to back up and discuss the contender for folks? I know this is your, by its name, this is your competition bow. I tell everyone this would make a great hunting bow as well, but can you walk us through the design and the intent behind it?
it it is a great hunting bow or a great competition bow for both for the guys that require that bow to spring up in a D shape, a crescent shape, and when they roll it, it's all the rules. But for years I wouldn't build anything it wasn't just a mild RD or my English. I was I was kind of a hard head when it came to going this hybrid but there is a place for it. But that contender is a really nice shooting bow if it's built right. You build it narrow like I do the English, not too wide. Like my Edge and my Chief are both wider limb bows, but that contender is a great bow in the field. I if I could only if I could only have one bow to go hunting with, I don't know if I'd go English or contender. They're
Yeah,
just either one would be just great for me. It like I said, I shot that first mild reflex deflex bow that Dick Robinson let me shoot up at the North American Longbow Safari in Washington, and I thought, wow, this thing is really a nice performing bow. So that's kind of where I ended up with that contender. And I've thought about dropping different bows from my lineup at times because they don't. There's certain bows that you still pretty easily, and then there's other bows like the contenders. Not a lot of guys look at, well, that's not quite doesn't have quite the pizzazz or enough reflex deflex when it's strung up. It just doesn't look quite right to me. But I've thought about dropping it. But I've had that around since as long as the English, and I've
it's a
never
shooter.
I've never changed that bow uh, after I arrived at the final product. It's just where it is, and it's a good shooting bow.
And it's a, yeah, I can actually outshoot. I can take this bow, and I hate to say this out loud because I love the English. I can take this bow and put more points on a 300 round than I can with the English. It's a better shooting bow. It's obviously a flatter shooting bow, but I mean it has the grip cut out. It has your hand contoured for really good alignment. Long is this a bamboo?
It is.
So you've got maple veneer on the end here, and hopefully I'll get some pictures for the video that do it justice. But it's just a beautiful bow. If you want to shoot a competition bow that still feels like a longbow and it's trad, but will shoot up there with a Whip 10X and the other bows that are used in competition now, this is a great option. If you want a field bow, I tell people this is a great option because it does outshoot the English, and that's probably just mainly in the grip structure. And then, at what point did you eventually move in? Because I haven't got to play with your other designs that go more R&D. At what point in the timeline did you go there? And I guess the question I have for you as a bowyer, what are the trade-offs that you face whenever you start introducing more R&D? Is the ASL guys think the moment a bow gets curve in it, it's less forgiving, but all of the data points the opposite way, that bows are actually more forgiving.
Right.
So what are
There,
the trade-offs associated with more R&D?
I think there might be a little bit more cast and a little bit more speed, but then, it's all, it really comes down to personal preference, I think, in what an archer wants and what he wants to shoot and what he likes. Some guys just like a whole lot of limb, you get a lot of reflex, deflex in these extreme hybrid bows. Some people want a more traditional bow. They are easy to shoot. You get more reflex, deflex in a bow, and I think you go from the English to the Contender to the Chief, and then my they're they're easy to shoot, and people shoot them well. But personal preference, I think, and guys will look at my edge, for example, and say, "Oh, that bow has to be fast."
Right.
Well, uh, pound for pound and draw weight, I have a friend that Nate Bailey, who has a Life Outdoors YouTube channel, a good friend down here. He's got two of my bows, a Chief and an Edge, both 60 pounds. He has a short draw length, but he's chronoed them, and they shoot within a foot to 2 feet per second of each other. And guys,
Mhm.
so there really isn't a lot. They look faster, but they're probably not. And speed isn't everything. Find a bow that you shoot and shoot well and enjoy it. People overthink this traditional archery, I think, a lot, and
Yeah.
they're perfect bow, and get a bow that you're going to have fun with.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Get a bow that inspires you to shoot. And it's important to point out because I'll be able to show it with this. Chrono is 3 feet away, is the ATA standard. And having a 3 or 5 foot per second difference in this bow at a chrono that's 3 feet away versus the cast of a bow that's more forgiving to variances in my release, that'll give me more consistent and better
Sure.
cast. Chrono speed doesn't translate into field use all the time. Now, if you start getting into, the demon speed, super recurves, obviously that's going to turn into horsepower downrange. But whenever you're trying to make a decision across longbow designs, I would really rather speed not be a part of. And this wasn't me a year ago, but now that I've learned kind of where cast comes from, there's more to a bow than chronograph speed. I can guarantee you, I would predict this. I haven't tested this yet, but if I backed up to 30, 35 yards, I'll bet you I get better cast out of this bow, the longer English, than I do the shorter English, despite it being slower, because it's going to forgive me due to just string angle alone. It's going to forgive me for variances in my release and give me cleaner releases. And because of the length of the bow and the geometry, it's going to be a more forgiving shooter. So to me, chasing speed is really a terrible pursuit because you're often going to end up with a less comfortable bow. R&D doesn't necessarily give you that, but length certainly does. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yes.
So what are the ranges in your contender? And can you hold your contender up so people can see the difference in that riser?
I actually
Not
don't
the
have.
contender. I'm sorry, your chief. I have your
Oh,
contender.
it's really similar. Um, let's see. I'll get it turned around here. They're all fairly similar. I put a little bit more heel in them, and the limb width is generally a little bit wider than the Contender. I like to narrow up the Contender a little bit more than I do the chief, and a lot more than I do the edge. But
That makes sense. And then what are your lengths available in your chief, in your edge?
my edge, I go 58 to 64 inches, and then in the chief, I generally do 62 to 66 inch. I can do 68, but generally 62 to 66 inches is
And what's the range in your contender?
tender. I'll go 62 to 68 inches, no problem.
And you're saying the main difference when you say heel, you bring a little bit more swell in the heel here, but the width of this bow on the back side is going to be roughly identical.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay.
I have modified those handles over the years to where they're at now, and I just think they make a much easier shooting bow and more positive than what they used to be. But
When you say that, can you elaborate on that so people can I want people to understand the design elements. Whenever you say more heel, you're saying that's more stable?
it is. I think as you can push, you can place that pressure between your thumb and your forefinger when you're drawing the bow. And also another thing I've done over the years, I've changed the position of the grip in or the riser in the bow as it relates from into the center of the bow. That made a big difference. And
Really?
that was
Tell me what you did.
so I used to make those, well, so here's my secret. I used to make those bows, the shelf would be inside, shelf would be 2 inches above center. I have
Right.
lowered that inch and a half above center, and then with that positive locator grip, it just makes the bow shoot much better. You don't have to heel it. Of course, back in the day, I built those bows with pretty much a straight grip and a slight locator in them. That's all we did, and people shot them and loved them. But it's evolved a little bit. Again, you can only do so much to a longbow to change it and enhance the performance. But if there's some things, subtle things you can do, do it.
Yeah. Because if you really think about how I'm translating this, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you can affect tiller. Tiller is basically limb timing for compound guys moving into trad, getting your cams to roll over at the exact same time. We're getting our limbs to close at the exact same time. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
There's a few
Simple.
things you can do to affect tiller. One is finger pressure on your string hand, but your bow hand has a ton of effect on tiller. Like if you heel hard, you're going to pull harder into one limb versus the other. If you throat hard, you're going to pull harder. So what Alan's telling you is his secret is reality because I put load cells on each limb. So what he's done is he's optimized tiller by forcing you to grip the bow consistently so you can't create variation that his design has to overcome. And he's also optimized the load that you're putting on each limb by adjusting where the shelf is cut. But he's kind of forcing you to not, you're not going to be able to shoot this bow heeling it. And that's why when I test this bow, it casts better than most because it forces me to be consistent. And it is consistent in and of itself. So it's a brilliant design. And you've done this without CNCs and without load cells, so it's very impressive to me.
Well, like I said, a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while. So you
Yeah,
just
but you
keep.
got four models. You need to quit being modest. And then I'm assuming the shorter the bow you introduce, the more critical you found that to be.
Oh yes, definitely.
So
You need balance. Both has to be balanced. I feel to shoot right. Anybody can you can shoot a bow, but make it more user friendly to
so
accommodate.
help
Works
a
better.
layman like myself understand your definition of balance. Tell me what a balanced bow is for you, and help me look at a picture of a bow and determine if it's balanced, if that's at all possible.
Well, I don't know if that's totally possible, but when you draw the bow back, you want to be able to feel comfortable when you come back to your anchor point that the limbs are following the string the way they should be. You're not having to think about where your hand position is, or you just are able to hit your release point, look down range like throwing a baseball, and have that arrow strike the target where you want it to hit without having to overthink it. Well, dude, and I think I've known guys over the years who have developed target technique, and I think a lot of that is just because they're shooting bows that that weren't balanced right. and they're trying to compensate when they're drawing the bow back to make sure that I do this right or do that wrong. You should only have to hold the bow up on line, draw it back, hit your anchor point, get your back shoulder tension right and your elbow back and release, and that arrow is going to go where you're looking.
So when you say balance, just to make sure, are you saying balance between both limbs being equal and, and on plane?
Yes, yes, pretty much. There's probably some other factors in there I'm not aware of, but it just seems it works. So
So
works.
if you're at home and you want to know if your bow's on balance, I've been taught this. I don't know this. I haven't like validated this, but if your bow rocks in your hand as you're drawing it, you've got problems on your hand.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that you find that to be true?
That makes sense. It does. And to to be consistent, everything has to work the same over and over and over, time after
Right.
time. And if it doesn't, if you're having to rethink everything when you're shooting a bow, it's like you're going to struggle with that bow.
No,
And I,
absolutely. If you're shooting the bow, you tell me if this is wrong, and I shoot your contender here and it kicks really hard on the bottom. That's a sign that either the bow's designed incorrectly or it's a sign that I'm heeling it too hard, right? That we would want the bow to jump kind of straight even. Is that what you mean by balance as well?
you're probably trying to compensate for what the bow is going to do on release. You it hit your for your point of impact, and you're trying to heal the bow because that's where it seems to make it shoot right. But is
Okay.
that how's that going to translate into a say a hunting situation when you're maybe out of position, you're on your knees, hands and knees, and maybe a little out of sync and a little having to lean around a tree or something. What's going to happen then? But that animal's only 10 yards away and you should be able to make that shot easily. Well, you don't have to think at that point. You just want to have to shoot.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So, I mean, that's why I want people the value of getting behind the bow. They understand how you're designing a forgiving design to become robust to people like me that have target panic, have a bad release, don't have consistent grips. And that's just one of them. And the shorter the bow is, you're saying the higher this gets, and it kind of controls that more and more. So if I had to make you pick, you've already picked you said if you had one, you'd take this one, right? Which is a,
It'd be
uh,
hard for a really good sound hunting bow and in clutch situations. It just, well, you look on the wall behind me over my head, there's the result of a contender right there.
is
And
that a contender? That's good.
the
Uh,
contender right.
if your most forgiving bow would be what?
Oh boy. I, th- so here's the thing. The Chief is really a forgiving bow. Contender's a forgiving bow too, but I have guys come to the house here and shoot bows, and it's all over the board. And I'll think they're going to pick one model, they'll just do something else. I have a
Oh,
couple,
that's interesting.
so it's like I had a couple guys come at different times. One you may have heard of him, Jim Akerson. He was a past president of PBS, and great
Hmm.
guy, great. And he shot. I thought he was going to pick a Chief, and he picked the and he has my contenders, a couple of contenders. I think he might have an older Chief too, but he likes that edge. And I had a friend of his come down, and I thought he was going to pick the Chief. He picked the edge, but I look at their shooting style. They are pulling 29 inches, and they have shot recurves in the past, so they like that higher heel,
Right.
and they that pressure between the thumb and it's. But I'll have other guys come by here, and they just that Chief they'll shoot it and they'll go, boy, this is nice. It'll shoot a wide variety of arrow spines. And, you know, if I shoot 75 seaters or 75 80s out of it, the bow that's 50 pounds,
Right.
no problem. Right.
You bring up a
Uh,
good point. I forgot to ask you about this, and it's a failure on my side of the interview. Can you walk us through cut to center on each one of these designs? I apologize. I should have asked you that before we moved on from the English.
I cut most of my bows. I'll modify them to whatever somebody might want, but I cut them pretty close to the center. And then when you put the arrow plate on there, it's going to be a little off. But um, if you use mic harder in the riser, you can really cut them in the
You're right,
closer it's
right. But just a standard bow like this Osage, this is going to be cut almost dead on the center.
almost dead on, just a little slightly off, you know.
Okay, I forgot to ask you that, and that's important for people that are shooting wood arrows because you are going to go with a heavy spine arrow on these bows. There's no doubt about that. So so the chief is kind of your crossover. If you have somebody moving from recurves into longbow, you push them toward that chief or the edge.
I do, because it's going to be a bow that they can pick up and consistently shoot without having to worry about arrow spine and getting it perfect. Once you get it perfect for that edge, you'll dial it right in. But it might take a little while, and the guys should be a little more experienced that are shooting that edge, I think. But the chief, anybody can pick it up and shoot it, I believe, and go get a dozen arrows that are pretty closely spined to the weight of the bow, maybe 10 pounds over at the most, and it's nice.
What are the fundamental differences between the chief and the edge?
The amount of reflex and deflex.
Okay, and
That's
you're
all.
saying the edge requires more stable shooting than the chief?
It does. It requires a little bit more. And you, when I shoot the edge, and I shoot it well, it's funny. It can be a noisy bow or it can be a quiet bow.
It's tiller
And
sensitive.
yeah, it's a little more sensitive, and you have to hold it in your hand a little softer in your bow hand. If you grip down on that thing, you're you're going to notice a difference. It's going to
You
twang, and
throw
if
it
you
out of
don't,
time.
yeah, if you don't, it shoots fine, and it's a nice quiet bow. I have guys tell me that's the quietest bow they ever shot, but that hasn't been my experience at times with it, especially in the
Right.
shorter.
Yeah, there are a lot of those like that that can sound loud if you just place grip pressure on it slightly different. Your Contender is your forgiving lineups, more of your competition bow. It also makes a great field bow, and it's a do-it-all bow. I'm like you. I think it's a great design that's probably not as sexy in the mainstream because it's not an extremist, but it's more of an optimal design. People like extreme for some reason, but this is a very optimal design. It does everything. You could go shoot competitions with this, and you could go hunt with this. Obviously, not out of a blind, but um, where I place this English, it's a very unique design. I have a slide that I kind of cover all the designs, and I had to make a special box in that design because of you, or in that slide because of you in this design. It's ASL-ish, it's mild R&D-ish, but it's definitely its own category, and it's I believe, and I'm not supposed to say this because I'm trad lab, but I do. I try not to speak about things I can't quantify. Smith and Wesson has a combat masterpiece, right? John Browning has the 1911, and I've told you before. I feel like this is a masterpiece in terms of design because it's not going to outshoot a target bow, but when you pick this bow up and hold it, it's going to outshoot any other bow similar to this in design. It's going to outshoot an ASL all day long. It outshoots a lot of mild R&D longbows. It's much more forgiving than it looks, and it's handmade, and it's crafted by you one at a time, and they're always in time and they're always on plane. So it's a great bow for guys that want the nostalgia piece.
The, the mid handle, and then I run those laminations too on each side of that handle, and kind of set. When I designed that bow, Cody, I kind of, and the reason I call it the English is I wanted it to look kind of like an old English you would built
Right.
bow. That's why it's called the English, not because it is an English bow. I
Right.
just wanted in that appearance, and that's what I came up with, and it worked. So,
Yeah, it's stunning.
and it's reflex. It doesn't have really. It looks like it's deflex because the handle's forward ahead
Right.
or forward, but it's really just reflexed off of where the fade outs run out. That's where the reflex starts and goes ahead.
Let's see if I can find the fade outs because it's a really long riser. If I can, right here. I mean, that's a lot of riser. I think that's why it shoots so well and it's so soft. And then, like I said, it's hefty. But that's the lineup. Um, did we miss any?
For in all practicality, you can only make so many bows and designs. And, I'm getting to the point in my bow building career. I'll be 70 here in December. Yeah, how many more years I'm going to do this. I enjoy building bows. I enjoy the interaction with the guys like you and those trad guys out there who really get it. We're really not looking for that high performance, that perfect bow. Well, you're testing bows, and you could find that perfect bow through your testing,
Mhm.
uh, all the work you do. But still, it comes down to, is it a fun bow? Is it
Right.
handcrafted? And am I going to, when I go out in the field with this and shoot an animal, am I going to say, did I accomplish something? Or was it because of the bow, or was it because me and I was able to take a bow and enjoy it in the field? Wood arrows and longbows, like Ron LeClaire said years ago, they go together like ham and eggs, and I've always stuck by that. I love wood arrows and I love longbows. I shoot other arrow materials, but I had guys over the years ask me, "Were you going to build a recurve?" I said, "There's lots of good recurve builders out there. Go buy one from them. I'm going to stick with what I like best, and longbows are it. That's just the way I am."
It's one common theme I found in interviewing bowyers. Their best bows are often their favorite bows.
Yeah,
The St. Patrick's Lake Longbows. His favorite bow is his American stick, which is his ASL, by far one of the best ASLs, right? But his I can always tell where a bowyer's spirit is, right, and where they're placing their time and their effort. And you're absolutely right. A bow, I test for a lot of things because people want different things. But a friend of mine said it best years ago. He said a bow's number one job is to inspire you to shoot it. Because we all shoot lousy enough. There's eventually a time where you want to just throw the damn thing down and walk away. But the bow's number one job is for you to look at it and want to go shoot it well and to know that it shoots better than you. And you definitely produce that. And um, I mean, these things are just, I'm really proud of your work. Uh,
well,
Handmade bow, cut the wood down yourself, age the wood down. When they're holding one of your bows, they're holding all of your effort that's accumulated over the last 40 years. And I'm really, really proud of what you bring into the community because your bows offer a ton of value to people. They really do. And you're kind of you're not hidden by any means, but I sure didn't know about you until Orr introduced me to you. And I think I turned loose one arrow on this. I'm like, oh my God, where's this guy been? But it's a well kept secret, but you're a great bowyer. Really happy to have you in our community.
thank you. I try to do my best, and I try to put out a product that people are going to enjoy. Yeah, I enjoy building them. They're fun to
Yeah, I
build. And I
would,
tell people, don't overbow yourself and don't overthink this. Get a bow that you're going to have fun with and enjoy, and take some time with it. Take some time with it to get to know the bow, and you might find out it might shoot a little bit better than you think it does.
yeah, that's my
Any bow.
biggest problem, to be honest with you, especially with longbows. You got to shoot one bloody longbow, and you've got to develop your subconscious shot around one longbow. If you're like me and you shoot 7 bows a day, you're a bloody mess. You really need to buy a longbow and let your shot conform to that. You got to learn how she wants to be shot, and then you've got to let your body drill that into your subconscious. I completely agree. That's part of being a longbow shooter, I think, is can't play with all the toys. You got to pick one and dance with the girl you brought.
Yep, that's right. My story, and I'm sticking to it. So.